Well, hi everybody. First off, depending on well, no, I think no matter what time zone you're in, happy Valentine's Day if that's your bag. If you're into that kind of thing. So tonight I am joined by Forrest, who has been running our Ghostbusters game, and Kim, our Twitch mistress. And we're going to take a little time to talk about safety tools. Because no matter what level you're playing at, whether you're playing, in front of an audience, whether you're playing in your home game, whether you're playing in pickup games at a con, whether it's old friends or strangers, at some point, something's going to happen where someone in the game may be affected by what has happened, whether it's a phobia that has hit or a painful memory that was brought up. So, we want to talk about the tools that we use in our games to help avoid those incidences or how to deal with them when they do come up. So we're going to kind of treat tonight as just a little bit of a roundtable. We've got a couple things that each of us is going to talk about, but we'll all talk about all of them. And then if you have any questions in chat, you can throw those out and we will try to hit those as we go. Or if there are other tips or things that you would like to share, we'll have a kind of a section for that at the end where we can talk about, because what I don't want to do is have anything get lost
Mhm.
in the feed. So yeah, I think we're gonna start with the session zero. So first, do you wanna start us off with how you
Yeah.
run your session zero?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so I've loved playing role-playing games and been doing it for a long, long time. And honestly, my philosophy around all this stuff has really it took a long time to develop because it's a thing of learning and listening to people and stuff. I know that in like in my early days of GMing, I had the kind of philosophy of like, well, I'm the GM and what I say goes in my game, and if you don't like it, you can take a hike and stuff. But I as I grew and listened, got the chance to hear what people said and listen to how the experiences of those kinds of things affected people, and let that new information change my view on stuff, which I think is so important around every bit of gaming, is just being open to changing when given new information. Because I think we start operating from that standpoint of like our point of view and where we're coming from and our experiences. And then when we do that, and we assume that everybody else has our experiences, or just by default, we lose so much of the chance to be connected in relationship with people.
Mhm.
Yeah, it
And
always blows my mind when you see like someone post online or in they used to have a wall where you could post for games at a game store near me, and you would see like, I've been here, I'm a GM of 20 years, and in my games there will be this and this, and if you don't like it, find another game. And I was always like, I I will. Like this
Okay.
good wow.
thanks for letting me know. Yeah, no, it's true. And so one of the things that I use a lot is like you said, the session zero. Like, let's just talk about it before we start, and get things out in the open on the table, and find out where things are at. There's so many different aspects to the game to get on the same page with, especially if you're in a long-term game, which
Mhm.
really I think is where the session zero comes in the most. You can have kind of a mini session zero for one shots and cons, and just go, hey, real quick, as we're getting started, these are some of the themes of stuff in my game, and this is there are possible trigger things happening. I want to see like what kind of things are your comfort levels
Mhm.
in these areas, so that everybody knows about it ahead of time. Especially a lot of time I run horror scenarios at convention games because it's really fun, contained kind of situations.
Mm.
Um, so being able to talk about that stuff in advance and then go, all right, let's go, you know, and it really helps also to establish what kinds of safety tools I'm going to be using, or if anybody else has things that they want to use, that we can talk about it. And, you know, I'll say up front, like, oh yeah, I'm super familiar with that. Or, you know, I'm not as familiar with that. So I'm going to need your help to know how to, like, reminders of how we're using that if something comes up. But yeah, it's a great place to start just saying communication is the most important part of safety. And if we can talk about these things and understand that everybody wants everybody else to feel good, then we can work through things and hopefully have everything always come out on the positive end. And it doesn't obviously all the way every time, but at least everyone feels like they're being listened to.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in a session 0, apart from things like picking, like creating your characters together, creating the world, a useful thing, and one that I have always been doing for a while, but finally have like a cute name for it, is cats. And I'm not just talking about it because I love cats so much, but CATS, concept, aim, tone, and subject matter. Are all great things to go over before you are about to start a game. Concept is, what is the game at a high level? What is it about? You know, like in Monster of the Week, the concept of Monster of the Week is that we are a bunch of monster hunters that are learning about, that are trying to solve mysteries, determine what the monster is, and stop them. What is the aim? What are we trying to accomplish with the game that we are about to play? Are there winners or losers in this game? What kind of stories are we telling? Tone. This is an important one, especially for talking about safety tools. Is the tone comedic, scary, dramatic? You know, how much humor are you sort of, you know, not like permitting, but how much humor are you expecting to be in this game? How much levity? Are we operating from a very like dark, brooding place, like in a game like The Between, or is it kind of a pulpy adventure game? You know, a good idea for that is like, what is the, if you were pitching this game as like a movie, what is the rating and what is the genre of this game that we're doing? And then subject matter. What are the topics or the themes that you imagine might be explored in this game? And this is a good time to sort of, especially if you're running something like a one-shot, just sort of saying like, hey, you know, this game involves XYZ. It involves murder, body horror, whatever you have. And then that can be sort of further refined or further discussed by using another session 0 tool, which is lines and veils. But I really like cats as a kind of like initial like GM way of just kind of like setting the table of like, this is what we are going to play, and this is what I'm trying to do, and these are the things that might come up.
Yeah, and you know, especially when it comes to like subject matter, if we're talking about a you know, a game at a con, for example, one of my favorite things about when we run games at cons is that now we have a folder of a dozen different mysteries, so that if we sit down and everyone makes their characters, then I'm like, okay, one thing that I always do is before we start, we take a break, and if anyone has anything specific that we haven't covered, they don't want to say out loud, you know, I give everyone paper and they can write it down and pass it to me as everyone's leaving, so that if I know like, oh, this person like spiders is a hard no, or body horror, whatever, I've got a bunch of different mysteries in case I was going, you know, Tass wrote a mystery called the Meat Bus, which has a lot of body horror in it. So if I know that that is something that someone is uncomfortable with, I know not to run the meat bus, because it's going to hit them in a lot of bad ways.
Mm-hmm.
So having that ability in a con session specifically is so nice to make sure that you've got, something that is PG, something that is R, something that's PG-13, and something that's a little more comedic, something's a little more serious, so that you can, pick it for the group you have at the table. Because if like we run Monster of the Week, 5 or 6 sessions, you're going to get a different table build, and they're going to want a different kind of experience. And it's such a nice tool to have. One, the knowledge of what each mystery is kind of rated, and what genre it's in, and what it contains, in the sense of things that could be triggering for people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what a great way to start off with setting expectations for people. Like the idea of, we're gonna play horror game, and it's gonna be dark and scary and stuff. So, like, even though something might strike you as funny, like, let's try and keep those things on the minimum.
Mm-hmm.
And allow ourselves to really delve deep into those darker kinds of things. Or, on the flip side, like, we're gonna play a horror game. But it's more like Camp Dread. We're going for the campy horror that makes you laugh, kind of thing. They're very different tone, even though they have similar subject matter. So that's great. I love that. Cats
Yes.
is awesome. I wrote that one down. I'm gonna have to Yeah, and I also use with the session 0, it's a chance for me to also discuss things like, how much of a role do we want to have be player versus player, whether it's relational, or combat, or do we want, sometimes a character may have experiences that they start to turn against the group, or things like that, because that can be, for some people, that's a fun part of the game, like letting the character develop and be like, nah, through this experience, they're burned, they're not coming back on this, they're burning bridges, or they're working against people. But for others, that might be a thing where that's a negative experience. They want to play a role-playing game like this to have that, like, let's work together, let's overcome those negative experiences and stuff. So having that dynamic of how much working against each other is allowed, and where's the line as far as, like, it's normal to have relational drama kind of things happen, versus there's a chance that the whole party disintegrates into chaos, or and establishing the characters' relationships to each other, and having that be a place of, like, let's establish the safety boundaries around these things, with that. So some other things there.
I think that's a great segue to talk about another great pre-game safety tool, and that's establishing lines and veils before you go in. Lines and veils are a magnificent tool that is about establishing boundaries for the story, and they are lines and veils are defined by each player individually, including the GM, honestly, and they can be done either as a group or in private. And so lines are hard boundaries that will remove the specified content from the game, no questions asked, no judgment whatsoever. And very, very common lines that I know exist in our group are things like harm against children or harm against animals, sexual violence, things like that. Veils are softer limits where the player is okay with it being included in the game but it isn't explicitly described. I had a veil. Ordinarily, I have a line against spiders in any scary game whatsoever. I had a veil in spiders when I did Afterlife Wandering Souls because the GM was pitching it to me as this kind of like Kingdom Hearts-esque sort of fantasy environment. And so I said, all right, so a veil on monstrous spiders, but like friendly NPC spiders are okay. um, and yeah, that's a great thing to fill out before the game starts, or to talk about what your lines are, what your veils are, just going into the game, so that everyone is on the same page in terms of what's going to make everyone comfortable at the table, because that's the important thing at the end of the day. My fun does not supersede anyone's comfort.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
think it's important to note too that, like, you fill out these lines and veil sheets, and we talked about this earlier. Forrest used lines and veils in the first game that I played with him, and he was juggling. How many players were you juggling in that one shot, or not that one shot, but that
that 4-part? Yeah,
uh-huh.
it was. We had like 9 or 10 players in that, and that were in and out of different sessions, and then we had some from each come together at like team up Arrowverse style kind of thing.
Yeah. So they had a lot of moving parts, and they had all of the players fill out lines and veils. And I think it was in the second game that we played, so it had been quite a while since we had went over this stuff. But we were going through a section, and one of my lines that I usually put down on a sheet is eye stuff. Just I don't like damage to eyes; it freaks me out.
Mm-hmm.
And I was playing as Ferguson, but I was playing as like a wood sprite. And I can't remember what happened exactly, but we like blew up a tree, and I got a failure on it, but I still blew it up. And he kind of described, he's like, yeah, you look up, and as this tree explodes, a splinter just goes into your eye. And it's interesting because in that moment, like, it didn't hit me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, something that was on my lines did not like make me go, oh no. And so we went through the scene, and I even like made a joke about how I was like looking around and it was moving as I looked around. And then after the scene, I was like, hey, it doesn't matter. I just want to throw this out there. Eye stuff is something that is on my lines. And he was like, oh gosh, do you want to go back and redo that? I said, no, I think I'm okay. And we took a good 5-minute break to just kind of chat about it. And this kind of gets into, what do you do when these things come up?
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of want to throw that out as an example of how your lines and your veils are fluid. You're going to fill them out on this sheet, but that's not the end of it, because there are going to be some days where something's going to hit you bad because of an experience that you've had, or there's going to be days where something offhand gets mentioned that normally is something that hits you, and it doesn't. Maybe the context of it, or maybe the way that you made a joke about it, something about it doesn't hit you. Having something on your list or not having something on your list isn't the end all when it comes to how you deal with that in the moment.
Right.
So
I
would think it's important to say. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Thinking of your lines and veils as a kind of like living document, if this is a document that can be sort of added to or edited, or also just something that can be just updated, just even verbally at the table of being like, hey, we just, because there's no, I can anticipate my response to things the best that I can, just sort of in a vacuum, not actually at the table. There is no telling exactly how things will hit you that particular day and that particular circumstance. And so, just because you there is no way to account for absolutely everything that might come up in every context in which that might come up, and so it's okay to adjust your lines and veils. It's a great thing, actually. Um, yeah, and that's getting more into sort of like safety tools used in the middle of the game in terms
Yeah,
of
yeah.
how you adjust those
Right.
stuff going forward. But yeah, that's one of the reasons why there's been so much online TTRPG playing in the last
Mm-hmm.
3 years, and one of the beautiful things that has arisen from that is that I play in a few games where the lines and veils is a shared like document online, like in a Google Drive, and it can be edited at any time, and it's a great tool just to kind of like look at right before you start your game in terms of being like, has this changed any? It's great. Technology is wonderful.
Yeah, it's really nice. Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff out there that you can find of those. I got a consent in gaming, you know, sheet that I got out of a larger document on like RPG
Yeah.
drive through and such, which is a good starting place. And it's got some open spots for, there's obviously for some people going to be things that are not on this list that are going to need to be lines or veils in there. And yeah, being able to then add stuff on later is so important. And I think all of it adds to just the trust that you can have with the other people at the table, because you know that the reason that we're talking about that is because you, as a player or a GM or as a person, you are more important than having this thing in the game. And that's I think the foundation of all of the safety stuff in general is just that you as a person matter and how you feel matters. And whether or not it would be a thing that would make me feel that way is not as important. That I can respect that that's your experience, and know that that's the most important thing, is you how you feel about a thing, that if it's making you uncomfortable, how I'm feeling about it if I'm uncomfortable, that I know that you're saying that that's more important than having that in there as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that it's not, it is not a quorum when a line comes up. It is not did this affect the majority of the people? It is individual, because at the end of the day, no matter how you're playing a game, whether you're playing it online, whether you're playing it at home or at a con, you're doing it to have a good time. I hope. I hope you're not going to like, man, I'm going to go and just, I'm just going to hate it. Like we want to go, we want to have a good time. And part of having a good time is that sense of safety.
Yeah.
Even at really good haunted houses, there's always that part of you that knows like you're safe. It's still scary. It's still surprising. There are still things that are going to be twists and turns, but you're ultimately in the back of your caveman brain, hey, this is okay. And so that allows you to give in to the fun of what you're experiencing.
Yeah. Chaotic in chat sums it up very well. The game is not as important as the people around the table. 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so great. That's basically what I tell my kids about things is people are more important than things. People are more important than pretty much anything.
Yeah.
My son asked me yesterday, he said, "Are people more important than food?" And I said, "Yeah." And he was like, "But don't you need food to live?" And I said, "Yeah. But if you have two people who both need food, then you can work together to find food and share. And then everybody's better. And that's why people are more important than things." And he was like, "Whoa."
So let's we've talked about tools that we can use before a game begins, like session zero, lines and veils, cats. Let's talk about tools that you can use during a game if things come up that start touching upon those lines and veils, or even just a way to kind of move through. Oh, there's a cat on the stream. A way to move through possibly difficult subjects in a safe and comfortable way.
Yeah, I will do the X card just because I have
Absolutely, yeah.
such a fun little, just a fun little story um, that doesn't actually. Well, you know what? I'll just tell the story instead of trying to explain the story. So the X card. The X card is if you're in a physical location, it is something that everyone at the table can have either a small card with an X on it in front of them, or there can be one at the center of the table. If you're playing in an online game, it could be in the chat that you just put a capital X, and that lets the person speaking, usually the game master, but sometimes just another player, know that whatever just happened, I'm not okay with this. This is uncomfortable. This has hit something in me, and so it is a pause, and we're gonna go back and I'm going to restate what it was I was just talking about to change and avoid whatever it was that was just hit. And in practice, it's something that if you don't want to necessarily stop the flow of the action, as opposed to we'll talk about these later with like a pause or a rewind. An X card is just kind of an instant thing, like, oh, hey, no, okay, and I'll go back and I'll redo this. One of the first times, safety tools, because I had played with the same group for so long, it was not something we ever thought about because we all knew each other very well. And then we started doing the podcast, and it became, the indie game scene, Powered by the Apocalypse and Fate and Dread and all these games that we play. The community is so generous with what they give for tools for safety for players, in as much that they even build them into their games, which is not something that we were ever really aware of. And so as we started to play more and more indie games, we realized how important it was to us to make sure we were including these safety tools, and that we are the players and our listeners all felt like it was a safe place to listen to a story. And if there were going to be big things, there might be something before the show to let you know. But so the first time I was playing in a game with an X card, we were playing this Monster of the Week game online, and it was on a stream. It was the first time I was GMing for another stream, and they invited me on. And we're like, okay, we're going to use the X card. We'll put it in chat. So if something happens, I'll just go back and I'll restate whatever I said. And so they're sneaking through this underground subway, and they come out, and there's all these zombies. And there's this big, massive one that is made up of like multiple zombies, and it's like crushing things. And as I describe it, someone on camera goes, and just no, she just does that. She rocks back, and so I stop, and I rewind, and I start describing it again. And we get to the end of the game, and I was like, I'm so sorry, I had no idea. And she was like, what are you talking about? I was like, that part where I went back and said that thing over again, like I took away the zombie. She's like, oh, I was wondering why you did that. I was like, well, because you did an X. And she's like, oh no, I was just excited, and I was like clutching myself. But she made like a perfect X on the screen, and it was just that ingrained of like, oh nope, this is wrong. And then I went back and redid it. So yeah, the X card is great, and once you have it ingrained in your head, it's going to be that automatic. That it doesn't matter what the story was. Like that villain was now gone, and now it was a completely different thing.
Yeah, I love the X card. It is a vital tool in my toolbox, especially when I'm doing especially when I'm GMing for people that I don't know very well, like at a convention or things like that. In fact, but especially at conventions or people where I don't know them very well, there is sometimes when we're all sitting around the table, occasionally a hesitancy to use the X card that I have sometimes seen. You know, people don't want to be judged for doing that, which is why when I'm GMing a game, I like to X card something almost immediately, and it doesn't have to be a big deal for a thing, but just, you know, something comes up, you know, someone is naming an NPC, and I just X card it and say like, hey, that's, you know, that's the name of an ex-boyfriend of mine. Let's pick a different name. You know, introducing use of the X card as like, you know, does not have to be a big dramatic thing. Just, you know, like, hey, let's rewind. Let's do a different thing here. Like by the GM sort of not only introducing the X card, but using it, and, you know, using it in a very in like a very chill, very relaxed way, I find usually encourages the players to follow suit.
Yeah, that makes sense. Being able to model it. You know, people learn a lot. This is me coming from my teacher side of things, because I teach music in elementary school, and I've taught everything from kindergarten through high school and everything, but with music. But the way that we learn by watching other people do things. You know, it's easy to talk about something, and you can get that idea of how something works. But when you see it in action is when it becomes real and something that people can really connect with.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's great.
Mike has a good question. How do you handle people jokingly X-carding things? I've never really known how to handle it, but there's almost always someone who does, haha, that joke was so bad, I'm going to X-card that joke, or similar.
I have to admit, I have never run into that.
Yeah, I haven't either.
Yeah.
And I think that part of it might be the weight that you grant it when presenting the idea to the table and giving them examples of what it's for. That it's not for decisions that you don't like, or you know, bad rolls or whatever, that it is specifically for things that make you as a player that could be hitting on a topic that you're uncomfortable with. So I think that would be my impulse, is to maybe give it a little more weight, or maybe give a few more examples specifically of the kind of things at your table that you've seen the X card used for before. And maybe that'll help deter people from using it as a joke.
Yeah.
I think also, you know, again, I haven't had that experience either. But from my personal standpoint on it, I think that the way that I would handle that is just to say, hey, I totally get what you're doing here. You're saying, let's cancel that. That was a terrible joke. Totally fine. But let's remember that our safety tools aren't a joke. And so that we can keep those a thing that's special to keep everyone feeling comfortable. Like, funny joke, but let's not do that anymore. We need to keep the X card and all of our safety tools like separate from our joking, because we don't want to make anybody else. Because if it's something that you joke about on things, that means it's not serious. And if it's not serious, then that is a type of judging someone who uses it. So if you're joking about it at the table, like, that's I understand the intention behind it, but the impact it's going to have is that when somebody feels uncomfortable, they're going to be less likely to use it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about another one of my favorites in-game safety tools, and I'm happy that Mike's in chat because Mike introduced this one to me, and that is script change. I love this one. Script change is a collection of tools that can be used in the middle of a game, and either by like cards, hand signals, or even just speaking it aloud. And the tools in script change rewind, which is you can just say, hey, I'd like to rewind this. If something has happened in the game that makes someone uncomfortable for any reason, and you can just say, hey, I'd like to rewind this moment or this statement or this thing that happened. And it's not like undoing a roll, but just being like, hey, this is touching upon something that I don't like this, can, instead of being hurt in the eye, can it be somewhere else? And you can just sort of rewind to a point before that happened and start play again. Fast forward is it can be used when you would like to skip past something or skip to the next point. We use that sometimes when it comes to romantic or sexual situations by just a fade to black, and time passes and the moment is over.
hmm I feel like I remember some of those.
Yep. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh.
Whoosh,
Exactly.
whoosh, whoosh. Yep.
Pause. I love this one. Pause can be used when things are too intense, but you still want to continue playing the scene, and you can just sort of pause and either take a break. You can get up from the table. I love like an open table policy in terms of being able to walk away if you need a minute. We have that when we're recording the show. People can get up if they need to. But and just sort of pause, and you can either just sort of like discuss what's going on, or you can sort of like, it's especially when things are starting to touch upon things that might be triggering or a little difficult to go through. It's really nice to just sort of take it out of character for a moment and just have everyone, sort of touch base about where is everyone, what are we trying to get out of this scene, how are we going to how are we going to do this safely, as well as and so expanding upon that, going sort of frame by frame is another really good script change tool that I like to use, where it's like, what is happening is okay, but let's just take it very slow and make sure that we are checking in with each other, so that it's not going to a place where we're going to need to rewind or X card or something like that. Let's be very considerate and very, very aware of how everyone is doing. And then, of course, resume can be used when everyone's ready to, after a pause, to start playing again. I love this tool. I love using it. I love that it has phraseology that is very common for people in terms of, it's very easy to introduce things like rewind, fast forward, pause, even if you have a group that is not very well versed in TTRPG stuff.
Right. Yeah, it's really nice being able to have, because we all have been watching TV and movies for so long at this point, that those kinds of storytelling tools and tropes of like how that stuff works in watching a scene, and like, oh, we're gonna pan away, or all that kind of stuff. Everyone knows what that means.
Yep.
It's great to have that common language to be able to work with. And I really like that the frame by frame, like, hey, let's keep going, but just everybody bring their awareness to their comfort level in here and stuff, so we can move through it and work on it and be okay. I like that.
I think the other one I will touch on then is the check-in. that at the end of a play session, you check in with your players or with your GM, whatever direction this is going, and it's just a, hey, things got kind of heated there, or how's everybody doing? That was a lot. That was really emotionally draining, or that was really, I could feel you all were frustrated. What's going on? And it's just that open door policy again to kind of chat about what happened, what everyone is feeling, and if they're okay with the direction that things have gone, and if they're still okay with the direction things are going. The example that I will use is that, everybody always talks about that they really like, there's a specific section in season 1 where the team kind of gets chastised by someone very powerful. And it was a very intense scene. And because I've known Tess for so long, and the bulk of that scene was between him and I knew that was fine. But still, it was enough that after the fact, I was like, okay, whew, how you doing? He's like, good. Whew, boy, that was rough. I was like, yeah, it was. But it was just enough of a check-in. It was the check-in that the two of us needed. The check-in is going to be different depending on your knowledge and relationship with that player. And I think that is kind of a blanket statement for literally everything we have and will talk about tonight, is that the way you use these tools will also not be the same with every player. It's going to be different depending on your relationship with them, their relationship with the story, the tools, etc. These are all guideposts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they help to give a framework to conversations that need to happen. I think that's really the thing, is that these conversations have the possibility of being very uncomfortable, but by giving them a framework to work in, or giving ourselves a framework to use, then we can handle them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No matter where they go, that we can at least talk about it.
Yeah, having a check-in with your players, or checking in with the GM is very important. Any kind of like aftercare is very important. I know that I am a player who sometimes experiences like a lot of bleed between like something happened to me in a TTRPG and it is still affecting me once we sort of end the session. And sometimes I feel things very emotionally, and it's sometimes difficult for me to like put the character away when I put my dice away, and taking a moment to kind of either like calm down before, unless so that I don't say anything from a very volatile emotional place. But then later, and this can be like a day later, an hour later, just sort of talking with my GM or talking with my scene partner about like, hey, how are you doing after this intense role play that just happened, or this moment that happened? And I do that a lot. I talk to my GMs constantly about things that happened in the game. Because it's an important part of my process to sort of like put my characters away at the end of recording, and kind of get perspective on how things are doing. Yeah, having that aftercare, having that debrief with your GM or your player is an extremely important part of my process, and a very important safety tool that I like.
Yeah, absolutely. I like Zarian in the chat said that he says, I like a safety system that basically indicates I'm okay, or I'm sorry, I'm fine. It's the character that's angry or upset, etc. when playing a game that could potentially get intense. Yeah, being able to indicate like I am acting angry, but it's not how I feel, or I'm acting afraid, and being able to show like I'm okay for us to keep going in this scene. This is on purpose. And being able to recognize that and share that with people is pretty great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've had that conversation with Kim early on in Perilous Tides, because I'm playing a crotchety old man and he's quick to anger. I'm not. But there's times where I have to be like, hey, I don't care. I love this choice. Sayer hates it. So when he talks to you next, you're gonna hear it. But it's just him. It's not me.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. My character tends to make a lot of very emotional, impulsive decisions, and so there have been many times where there have been like tensions have been very high amongst the characters, and we all kind of. I've had those conversations with Sayer. I've had those conversations with Megan at the table of us being like, just sort of going out of character and being like, "Hey, I love you. It's everything is fine."
Mm-hmm.
Or Rev and I playing masks, and our characters had like a very big
Oh,
fight
yeah.
in the middle of an episode, and then once the sort of action had kind of turned away from us, we both then just like immediately DM'd each other like, "Hey, good job."
Yeah. Love those kind of things where it can be like, wow, that was such a great scene in interaction. Like, whoa, cool choices. Like, that was big.
Yeah.
Stuff is so great. To be able to cheer for each other in making big choices, I think is really cool.
Chaotic is mentioning another tool that I love to use in the post game that I was going to bring up, and then they did the nice thing of bringing it up in chat to give me a nice segue. Stars and Wishes. I love Stars and Wishes. I talked about this on a whole 2 episode a couple of months ago. Stars and Wishes is a great way to sort of reflect on the session that you just had and communicate feedback in a positive way. At the end of the game, everyone can go around and give stars for things that they really enjoyed and loved about the game. Like, a star for Rev for that really funny scene that you did, or like a star for our GM. This monster was like really cool and very scary. I liked getting the opportunity to do this. And so that can be like character decisions, story moments, anything else that made that sort of you liked seeing. And then wishes are things that the participants, both players and GM, would like to see going forward. Like my wish for next session is, I would like to get the chance to for my character and Rev's character to have a scene talking about this, or things like that. And it's a great way to sort of talk about like future story moments, future development things that you'd like to see, whatever you think might sort of whatever might improve that game in the future.
Oh, I like that. I'm not very familiar with this one. I like this.
Yeah, it's cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely like this. Kind of ties in with the check-ins on stuff, which I was going to mention before. I also like to do in the middle of the game if like there's something big or emotionally intense or whatever. In my home game, for example, we had a situation where my wife's character had in her backstory that all of her family had been killed, and that it was part of a coup that had happened, and she was part of a ruling family of Tritons. Then she had left and been gone for 30 years since then, and had never gone back, stayed as far away from the ocean as possible, and was confronted with this situation where it was she got tricked into going back. Someone triggered a teleportation circle that she was standing in, and then the whole party was going through not knowing what was on the other side. And given the situation where here are the people that were responsible for it, but actually they were being mind controlled by somebody else. And so then having to deal with this traumatic thing of how my character is dealing with this is a person who killed my brother
Mm.
in front of me versus but it's not really them, but is it them? And having that intense moment as those two characters like laid down and in front of them and said, we don't deserve to live. If you want our lives, you can have them. And then what was she going to do in response to that?
Mm.
Was like, all right, let's check in here. Are we doing okay? Like, where are we at on this?
Mm-hmm.
And then I don't check in after every session, but do like to go like, okay, we're at this point. We're, help me to be prepared for where we're going forward from here. What do you want to see? What kind of things do you want to have happen?
Mm.
What are you enjoying a lot? Do we want more of this type of interaction? Do you want to have more combat stuff? Do you have storylines you want to pursue? All that kind of stuff can really help me in my preparing, and also just make sure that we're all on the same page of everybody's having a good time. So yeah, I like the stars and wishes ties in with that stuff really nicely.
Yeah, I really like Stars and Wishes because, as Chat was saying, it's a safety tool that is proactive rather than reactive. It's sort of helping focus the game towards like where you want to take the story. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that idea of the wishes because someone I think Chaotic mentioned that it used to be rose and thorns, and that thorns was maybe a little too.
Mm-hmm.
But I like the idea of it being wishes because you can phrase that either in I wish that I I wish that we spent a little more time doing X instead of doing Y,
Mm-hmm.
or it can be that I wish that this thing that we've been kind of putting on the back burner would come up because it gives the game master I've talked about this before and we haven't mentioned it here, but I wholeheartedly believe that the players tell you what kind of story they want to play when they create their characters.
Mm-hmm.
Because if someone spends all of their time creating this character with this really intense background about battle and their animal companion, they want to be in fights where they utilize their animal companion. If you've got a character who makes their one choice for their extra thing to be a car, they want to have something to do with that vehicle. It's not just something that, oh, I just picked a car. No, they want to do something with that. And so to hear from your players like, oh, here's something that I'm thinking of the number of times that I would have loved to been able to say like, man, I wish this thing would come up,
Mm-hmm.
and like how that might have structured the game for me differently or my character's journey. I really like that.
Yeah.
Totally. And it can be, just as I'm thinking about it, can be a great way for players to communicate with each other.
Mm-hmm.
I wish that you would come more out into, like, I wish you would be more involved in our conversation stuff, or I
Mm-hmm.
wish that we could have a chance for our characters to get to connect, or
Yeah,
what
like
kind
have
of
a
Yeah.
scene
thing that's
together.
been
Yeah.
a rubbing point for them or something.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah,
a
that's very cool.
great communication tool. Awesome. Thanks for bringing that up, Chaotic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else? I mean, obviously there are
There.
tons of other
Oh
things.
gosh, so many.
But
Yeah.
is there anything else that we want to chat about in particular tonight? When it comes to tools that we have had or experiences that we've had, or this would be a good time too if anyone in chat has any other questions or other tools that they use that they'd like us to do a rapid Google search on and talk about.
I think an interesting one that I would like to like pick both of your brains about, and we've talked about this in the general, but in the specific is the use of safety tools once you are doing a TTRPG that is for public consumption. Like, are there any differences that are sort of going on in your minds, or any changes to to those safety tools and how they're used if you know it's going to be on a live stream or be recorded for a podcast. I know at least for the podcast, a lot of that gets edited. A lot of things or lines and veils or rewinding or taking things will usually just not make the edit, but especially in things like live streams.
I mean, it's hard. This is such a weird I've said this a couple of times at different conventions and stuff, but like, I can't think, with the exception of course, like things that people might have a phobia of, whether it's spiders or the dark or centipedes or whatever. There's nothing on the lines and veils that it would even cross my mind to put into a story. And so that's just not and I realize that there are stories where that kind of stuff would make for an excellent story. That's just not the kind of story at this moment that I am telling. Now, there might come a time where I've got a couple different games that I really want to play. One of them being Never Going Home, which is about a group of soldiers. Basically, the premise is that Hitler and his armies have put all of their energy into the occult stuff. And so now you are fighting a losing war against just an army of the undead that is under Nazi control. And it's obviously that would be a much darker story. So in the sense, though, of dealing with that on a live stream, again, I think it in part comes down to the players, but having that option to put an X in chat, really being aware. I anytime that I've done anything where people have given me very specific things on lines and veils, I'll have that up on a separate document. But usually, you're running, at least for me, I'm usually running a one shot or something that's only a couple hours, and then will be a couple hours again. So I can write it a little more specifically tailored to the knowledge that I won't be able to adjust it as seamlessly as I might in a podcast with an audience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, you all have been doing streaming a lot longer than I have. This is my first streaming experience as far as doing live games. I've done podcast stuff before, but I think that having that awareness of the audience is another person at the table is, I think, a way that I'm thinking about this, where at being able to understand where they're coming from, if there's something that's making them feel uncomfortable, having an awareness for our audience that their safety is as important as ours in that stuff is a great way to be able to incorporate them along the way. While they may not be actively participating in the game, that there can still be things. And so that might be something that looks like, hey, we're just as a trigger warning, we're going to be going through a topic here that you may be uncomfortable with. If so, check back with us in a little bit. No judgment, and or it can be a thing of just being able to hear from them, like, hey, things are making me a little uncomfortable. Is this a place where we could fast forward a little bit and stuff, and being able to go, yeah, like, no loss. It's no skin off my back. We got other stuff to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's a thing that I'm coming to learn as a part of this.
Yeah, audience as like another sort of seat at that table, I think is an important thing to keep in mind when you are live streaming a TTRPG. A discovery that I realized and then started implementing when necessary during some of our Omniverse Chronicles games. Was we were a handful of episodes into our very first Omniverse Chronicles I Hunt, which is a like modern horror game, and some topics were coming up involving insects and body horror that all of a sudden there was this sort of shared realization amongst all of us as players and also in chat being like, we should have warned people about this. and so I then started implementing a system where I would check in with the GMs before those games, being like, hey, obviously there is no accounting for 100% everything that might come up, but to the best of your ability, what do you think will come up this session? And that was something that I used a ton in iHunt, in Masks, in Crossroads Carnival, and some of our darker games, just to, and then I would sort of set a little bot on a timer that would continuously remind people, being like, hey, this is an improvised game and it might cover these subjects, which was
a trigger warning.
Yeah, exactly. That's also something that we have used occasionally on the podcast, one time to my knowledge, for drug use, but that's also something that you can also implement, sort of just warning your audience ahead of time that something uncomfortable might be coming up. Because sometimes it's if I know that it's there, then I can better prepare for it, as a listener and as a consumer of media. Let's see. We have a few questions. How do you, as GMs, create comfortability in communication for players in a public setting, like during a stream or at a con?
A stream is easier than a con because of, at least for us, we do all of our streams on Discord. So at any point, someone can message me, and I've got that. I have got that window over on one of my sides so that I see it flash. And while someone else is then talking, I will take that in and start to make adjustments. At a convention, it really is a matter of getting everybody as comfortable as you can in that first, 45 minutes of establishing characters and establishing tone, and getting them comfortable with talking to each other and talking to you. And when I take my break, I make sure to talk to anybody at the table who hasn't talked much, just to get them talking to me a little more. It is, you never know how comfortable people are going to be talking about, things that are might be upsetting to them in front of other people.
Right.
But at the same time, on some level, they know when they come into this game, at least the genre, because in the description of the tickets that they get, they see, if you like Ash versus the Evil Dead, Buffy, or Supernatural, then this is the game for you. And so instantly you get a bunch of, you're like, okay, I know at least the genre this is in, where they're starting from. And so usually people will be more, it's not like it's not like starting from total scratch, as it might be with a live stream where maybe you're playing a game that some folks have never played, or you have an audience there who aren't sure what they're tuning in for. Yeah,
I mean, from my perspective, I've run a lot of con games before, and one of the things that I do is I try to put some really good descriptions of the game and the tone and all that stuff on sign-up sheets. When I do stuff, so they know, like, this is a game, it's 18 plus. Like, nobody else, if you're under 18, I'm not going to have you in the game because there's mature themes. I'll kick you out and stuff. And I'm sorry. Like, I also have games that I do sometimes at con that are like, this is a game for kids. I have there's a game called Mouse Guard It's based on the graphic novels. Love the stuff. The world building is awesome. The game system I couldn't wrap my head around, so I made it into GURPS. I just adapted it to GURPS because why not? But I just said this is only for kids. I don't want to do mixed up, and have to worry about adult kid interactions with people I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, and so those are all places where I can keep that in mind, um, and just that really strong establishing this is who this is for, and the kind of things you can expect from it is really really helpful for convention games.
Mm-hmm.
And then to, like you said, Rev, checking in with people as individuals and stuff in breaks is a great way to do, because trying to get that as a part of everybody in the middle of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's pretty tough.
Yeah. Well, unless there are questions that I am missing, and please restate them if I have missed them, because focusing on a lot of things. I do wanna thank both of you for Bluebeard's Brides. Never mind, Kim. Don't stop doing the outro. Bluebeard's Bride, Shiver in Fear, or other safety tools that have been mechanicalized into a system. We were actually talking about Bluebeard's Bride right before we went live with this podcast.
Yeah.
I have never played it, and I've really wanted to, and I don't think the other two here have played it. But I will very quickly talk about it. Bluebeard's Bride is a horror TTRPG that is based upon the sort of myth of Bluebeard, where all of the players at the table are role-playing particular aspects of Bluebeard's Bride as she is exploring Bluebeard's house, and then eventually opening or not opening the final door, which leads to horrors. So Shiver from Fear is it's a very cool move that I have never really seen anywhere else, where it is not triggered by a in-character decision. I will read the move as it is written. The move is triggered whenever you, the player holding the ring, so the player out of character, feel very uneasy when you squirm in your seat, shudder, or utter words of discontent to yourself over the descriptions in the game. No roll is required. When you shiver from fear, name the thing that you are most afraid will happen. The GM will tell you how it's worse than you feared. Keep the ring and choose 2, or pass the ring and choose 1. The thing that you're most afraid of will infect the bride with its perversion. It has the bride in its clutches right now. It speaks to you. Take 1 trauma. Just you. So it's a Shiver from Fear I like, because it's a sort of a way to check in with, hey, this is a scary moment that seems to be affecting you. How are you doing? It is giving, and then not only does it then sort of have a in-character reaction of, because you are afraid this thing will happen to your character, but it's also a way to sort of check in to be like, hey, do you still want the ring? Do you still want responsibility for controlling this character, or would you feel more comfortable if it went to someone else right now? Is a very it's a very interesting. It's a very interesting mechanic that I haven't seen in any other TTRPGs, but if it exists other places, please tell me. Let's see. Any suggestions for a GM or a player if someone at the table is making you uncomfortable and the safety tools don't seem to be working, or they aren't listening or respectful?
I want to pause there because Sabai, I'm sure I'm butchering that, has asked this question twice about what about a kid who loves horror and such. So if we could Just
Yeah,
I want to
absolutely.
make sure we
Yeah, sure.
don't lose that. Um, but yeah, for that, I would say, one, I would want to make sure that their parents are okay with stuff.
Mm.
Like that they know that they're there, that this is the theme of what's going on. Um, that they're very aware about the safety tools on there, and so like this is going to have things that are very intense and scary. If something is too much, like here's what you do, and if you're totally fine, you know, just to make sure that we're on the same page and they know it's okay, you know, that I'm never gonna want to go past where they are happy
Mm-hmm.
with the experience. I think is the biggest thing. Um, and also watching to see how they're reacting, because having empathy, I think, is the biggest part of
Mm.
that. Because if I can keep an eye on how they're doing, then you can tell if someone is happy and enjoying themselves most of the time, versus someone who's starting to shut down or shrink, or things like that, where it's like, oh, check-in point, like let's be aware of what's happening,
Mm-hmm.
and just checking in and saying, hey, is this too scary, is this too much? All of these things are okay, and you don't have to feel bad about the answer wherever it's at, and or do you just need a break and then come back and we're good? Like all of these safety tools that we've used, or discussed in previous, I think are a great way to just be on with them in that kind of situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I do have an example. Someone mentioned in chat that I had a Monster of the Week game where someone brought their daughter in to play, and I was like, "Hey, are you sure this is?" And he was like, "Oh yeah, no, she loves this kind of stuff." And I think, from my experience, and the few times that I've had younger kids at my table, like they don't have that qualm about telling you that they don't like something. There was this monster that was stealing teeth, and it would punch you and knock a tooth out and steal it. And it busted a hole in the wall, like through the couch through. And this girl was playing the monsters, and she had these big, beautiful dragon wings and dragon teeth. And she was like, uh, "That hole in the wall, I fly out of it." I was like, "Oh, okay. Where are you going?" She goes, "I fly away." I was like, "Oh, how far?" And she's like, "Until I can't see this anymore." So she left, and she put her character sheet down, and she picked up a bag of Cheetos and just started to eat. And I was like, "Okay, well, you let me know when you want to come back." And she's like, "Okay." And we probably played for like another 90 minutes, and then they got to the final battle, and she's like, "Okay, I fly back." And she was just
Great.
very, very honest about it. She's like, I don't like this. I fly away."
That's perfect.
That
Yeah,
is perfect. A
that has
great
become
example.
Yeah.
a constant reference for us whenever we at the table don't like something. Oh, I fly away.
Until I can't see any of this anymore.
How far till I can't say any of
Um.
this anymore?
That's
Uh.
great.
Yeah. Let's see. Follow up for the Bluebeard's Bride move. How to run that move in an online game, and most important, how to not cross any lines. In that moment. So I say this with the caveat that I've never run nor played that game, but I would imagine that an important thing before going into Bluebeard's Bride or another like heavy horror game like Cult or something is to be very clear with everyone at the table things like cats, concept, aim, tone, subject matter, as well as ironing out those lines and veils. A good sort of frame of reference for a lot of like indie TTRPGs is approaching it from more of a writer's room kind of discussion and less of a like I am the GM and what I say is absolutely definitive. I much
Right.
prefer a more collaborative energy at that table, and so offering up like if the player is saying the thing that they're most afraid will happen, the GM can say how that's worse than they feared, or maybe they'll ask someone else, how is that worse, how can we sort of create this moment in a safe way. But just how do you do that online? I think I would imagine that something like being on video would be pretty essential for a game like Bluebeard's Bride to make sure that that you are checking in with your players for those non-verbal cues. And yeah, just sort of being very mindful of the safety tools and very mindful of pausing when things get too intense or going frame by frame, doing check-ins, making sure that things are okay. All right, let's get back to Amada Beloved asks, any suggestions for a GM or a player if someone at the table is making you uncomfortable and the safety tools don't seem to be working or they aren't listening or respectful?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a tough situation.
Yes.
And I think we've all been in situations like that. I've been in a situation like that at a convention game where I was playing. Well, that happens sometimes. I get to be a player. and where a player was not responding to the GM's prompting to maybe change a behavior on there, that communicating the boundary kind of thing, and the GM in that game took that person aside and said, hey, I've tried talking with you about this. We've talked about how it's not fun for everybody if this kind of thing is happening. So I'm gonna say thanks for the time that we had, and we're not gonna have you continue at the table because it's not a fun experience for the people who are playing. And we continued on, and the game was great. We had a great time finishing out, and that was a Call of Cthulhu game that we were playing, and was, it was just things were a more positive experience from that point. Go ahead.
Yeah. I think that first step of just pausing the game and taking the person aside and talking to them, because there's a line of, is this clear to them? And a big part of that conversation is making sure that they understand that it's about the topic, the event, and not the person. And someone said earlier in chat, talking about the idea of like sometimes you bring up something to someone and they'll double down, and then that's I think where Forrest is talking about, like sometimes you just have to accept that not all tables are going to play well together, because there are people out there who, when I talked earlier this evening about like, hey, I've been GMing for 20 years and in my game you will see XYZ, and that is non-negotiable. And there are people out there who obviously are filling those games. So everybody wants a different experience, even if it's not the one that I would want to have.
Right.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Kim.
No, I think taking that player like aside, or just having a check-in, or saying let's review the lines and veils, let's talk about this, let's what's a different choice that we could make. I mean, I have been on both sides of similar situations. I have inadvertently brought up something in a role play that touched upon someone's lines and veils. I have had my own lines and veils touched upon in the middle of a game, and it happens. We are all human. We all get caught up in things, and the important thing is to just sort of take a pause, acknowledge that it happened, and then, you know, make a decision of, can we move forward in a meaningful, respectful way? And more often than not, yes, you can. You know, there is like every time that has happened to me in a game, on both sides of that, we have been able to sort of like pause and talk about it and then move forward, and it's fine. Like acknowledge that it happened, talk about how we can change it or how we go forward, and it's okay. If you can't do those things, then maybe that is not a player or a table that you want to be at, you know. No one's fun is more important than your safety.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and you know, it's a tough thing too, you know, because it does have a lot to do with how people feel about themselves and stuff. So sometimes there's an emotional response, you know, when a boundary is communicated, and they say something along the lines of, well, that's not what I meant, or it might be, or, but that's what my character would do, or things like that. And that can be an okay place to start in the conversation. But it's one of those things of, if they're not able to in the end go, okay, well, that's what my character would have done, but I'm the player and I get to decide what my character is like, and so I will respect that boundary and change it. And so now what my character would do is going to be different. Then that's if they won't do that, then like Rev said, you know, that might be a table that's not going to work well, you know, going on. If the conversation ever goes to a place though that people are not being respectful, or where things are becoming personal or hurtful in trying to communicate about those things, uh, I would like for it to be 100% clear that you are not obligated to remain in that conversation. You can walk away from that table. You know, that's part of the open door kind of thing. You can leave the table at any time for any reason. You communicating your boundaries to someone is not you being hurtful to them. And that if at that point that table doesn't continue, then that's also not your fault. Sometimes the right thing is for the game to end.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And you just hope that it's different next time. Because people are people, and some people like we talked about, work great together, listen and respect each other, and can move through that. And sometimes it's just like you reach a point where it's not going to happen, and you just have to call it and say, all right, well, the people that I do like to play with, that I felt respected with, I could continue to play, and maybe we don't play that same game, we do something different. And you go on from there, because there are always more people to play games with, and there's always more games to play.
Yeah.
I want to
You give
thank
it your
both of
try.
you for hanging out with me and talking about this.
Yeah, thank you.
This was really good. I said this kind of jokingly on Twitter, but I stand by it, that I think one of the most loving things you can do is communicate your boundaries and your needs with the people with whom you share time. And that seems very appropriate for Valentine's Day.
It does.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I do think that this is I'm gonna put this on our YouTube channel because I think that this is a cool thing, and we go over a lot of good resources, and I want to thank chat for hanging out and asking some really great questions.
Thank you. And on my side of things, I just want to say thanks for including me in the conversation. To be a part of that with you both as part of the Crit Show
Mm-hmm.
is really a blessing for me
Oh,
and means a lot.
Hmm.
Thank you.
thank you.
Well, I think that's it for us this evening. What do we got coming up this week?
Okay, I will very quickly go over the streams that await us. All right, it's a very packed schedule this week.
Mm.
Tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern, I'm gonna be doing a tarot stream, which I'm very excited about.
Oh,
We
that's
hit that
right.
Patreon goal a couple of weeks ago, so I am going to pull out my many decks of cards and do some first come first serve tarot readings. I'm gonna do some sort of 2-camera setup where you can see me and also my table as I'm doing it, and I'm looking forward to it. So come hang out with me as we talk about one of my favorite things, tarot. Wednesday, the 16th at 7 p.m. Eastern, Tass is back with Dead by Hump Day, where he is playing some Dead by Daylight. Thursday, the 17th at 7 p.m. Eastern, will be Mystery Detectives. Megan and I are going to be doing part 2 of our Nancy Drew recap. I'm going to put part 1 of our recap also on YouTube in like the next day or so if you want to get caught up before we dive into games 12 through 24 or however far we get into it. We've been having a lot of fun reminiscing about this sort of 2-year-long project that Megan and I have been doing. And then next Monday, after 2 weeks, we are back with episode 5 of the Omniverse Chronicles, Ghostbusters International, with starring our Ghost Master, Forrest Leder. Yeah. Thanks so much everyone for hanging out with us. This has been really nice. Chat has been so lovely and so positive.
Yeah.
I hope you all have a wonderful evening and a wonderful rest of your week, and we will see you here next Monday for some more Ghostbusters. I hope you have a great night.
I'm going to get mine first tomorrow.
Bye.